Welcome back to Restoring Sean, and today we have officially hit the finale of Season 2, the episode where I get personal and share all the lessons that I learned from the ranch. If you're new to the channel, I post a new video every Wednesday morning where I do some sort of electric scooter ride into all the work that went into restoring my second house, the ranch. All opinions are my own, never assume I have the correct answer, and did you know? This video is the last time I'm ever going to start a video with a random factoid. I figure it's the 26th episode. 26 is a special number to me. It's the season finale, and it's the last regular episode all the way up until January 1st, 2025, when season 3, Restoring the Estate, pops to life. So I might as well rip the band-aid off, right? Fine, one more for the road. Do you see this red bracelet? I have worn this, or at least an incarnation of this, since 2005. I was working for Express and hanging leg forms from the ceiling in the denim lab, and we had used this red cord to make nooses to do so. I had extra red cord, so I looped it around my wrist and tied it and just wore it. That first bracelet lasted 10 full years. The second bracelet I gifted myself when I moved to Austin, Texas, and now this third version I created when I quit retail and started my new adventure in a remote job that would lead me to moving home and ultimately creating this channel. I have a whole spool of this stuff and I will probably wear it for the rest of my life. How's that for a final act? Let's get started. Much like the end of season 1, I am going to break up this video into 3 parts so that we can essentially cover the same type of ground, and in doing so, get a few things out of the way. In part 1, I'll display the actual before and after photos so that you can see where it had started, where it ended, and then I'll give a brief description as a reminder for what went into each of those. In part 2, I'll answer some more questions that have come in over the course of the season, and then a few extra that came in right at the very end. And then in part 3, the actual lessons that I learned from my time spent in the ranch. Without further ado, let's roll into part 1. All right, cue the fucking slideshow. We're gonna go around the house first, then dive inside, and we'll do this in the reverse order from how the ranch was presented, which means this super cool front yard you're looking at right now is where the story begins. In the front of the house, everything was painted. The vinyl siding was painted with Sherwin-Williams Riverway paint, the garage door in African gray, and the trim in simply white. I replaced the lights on either side of the garage door and painted the fence in Sherwin-Williams iron ore. I removed the fence that was falling apart but hiding the trash and recycling cans outside, instead opting for a clean wall of the garage. I planted a tree, barely visible here, in place of the wild rose bushes, and framed it in with new garden trim. Up at the front stoop, I took down the drying and rotting wood rail and covered up the chipped and cracked concrete steps before staining them. With a new porch light, I also stained the bricks black and added some planters to get height and color during the summer and fall. Finally, I planted tall grasses along the front of the house to boost the appeal in the winter. Around back, we have more of the same. All of the vinyl siding was painted, along with the fence being repainted and the deck power washed and stained, though you can't see it here. You also can't see the old raised beds were now removed, all of the random chunks of wood from the yard having been burnt up, and the shed that I never took or retained a picture of, which had been essentially stolen due to my Craigslist ad. There was so much potential with the backyard, and while I did not even remotely attain that potential, I like to think that I got the stage pretty well set for the new owner to come in and make it really shine. The basement went through a big shift, 75% of that being from painting it in fresh white and covering the gross grayish white ceiling and tan walls, with the new wall color being Sherwin-Williams Snowbound. After initially finishing it off with new carpet and then having liquid caca come up through the basement floor drain, it was finished yet again. Trim was added for baseboards, all lighting was replaced, and the fireplace brick was stained black. I painted the window boxes as well, just for a little intrigue, and I would absolutely do this again. At the other end of the basement, the small powder room got new flooring, a new toilet and vanity, mirror, and lighting. Finally, the stairwell had the emerald green carpet torn out, the stairs cleaned up, painted, and with a new runner, and the walls were painted in Sherwin-Williams Urbane Bronze. The primary bedroom wasn't the biggest project, but it still had a lot of impact. When I moved in, with all rooms being painted white, any sort of color was going to make a big change. So in here, Sherwin-Williams Gale Force was the paint hitting the walls. I added the board and batten in simply white, which helped in breaking up the wall and adding a little bit of visual interest behind the headboard. The mirrored closet doors were replaced with the white French doors, and new trim was added around them. A nice sturdy curtain rod over the sliding doors capped it off, with drapes going to the ceiling to create a sense of height. The primary bath was a massive project that really boils down to gutting the space to the studs. All of the plumbing lines were redone, including the plumbing vent lines. All electrical was redone to move the switches from one side of the door to the other and accommodate not just the new vanity lights, but all new can lighting. After new sheetrock was installed and the walls were painted and snowbound again, the new navy blue vanity with white quartz top was installed. New mirrors and lights, new flooring, a new toilet, and then the custom shower of subway tile walls and river rock floor. It was a clean and bright space, and it didn't turn out too bad considering it was my first ever attempt at true construction. Simply put, what were once white rooms with brown trim were now colored. The guest bedroom was painted in Sherwin-Williams Evergreen Fog and had board and batten applied to the wall in simply white. A new drapery rod was installed, and all of the trim was painted. The closet doors and door to the room were coated in requisite gray, and the room was ready to roll. In the office, the process was the same, painting all of the trim white, installing board and batten, and painting the walls respite blue. The bifold closet doors were replaced with painted mirror doors from the primary bedroom, and the room was done. The guest bathroom had a nice update and was the first room to get the board and batten treatment. Going from flat white walls to a satin white detail and matte black magic from Sherwin-Williams, the space was transformed with new paint on the vanity, a new toilet and mirror and lighting. The guest bathroom was perfectly tied into the vibe for the rest of the house. Well, you've got to start with punching a hole in the wall, right? The kitchen needed to be updated in the worst possible way, and to achieve that, it needed to get opened up. I broke through the wall between the kitchen and the basement stairs, framed an opening, and then took the door down and widened that opening as well. Over the course of 2 years, I took down all of the penny tile on the walls, replaced the sheetrock, and painted everything snowbound. The cabinets were painted to create a tuxedo kitchen with Sherwin-Williams iron ore on the bottom and requisite gray up top. I used a countertop refinishing kit to take the dated laminate black granite to a not as dated white marble. Replaced all of the outlets, more importantly replaced the refrigerator and stove, and then removed the cabinet above the fridge because it didn't fit and wasn't used. Then, with the help of my amazing father, installed a custom-built island he created for me, more than doubling the storage that was available and giving a great worktop for making meals. Finally, new can lighting was installed along with a new chandelier over the dining area, and the kitchen was done. Lastly, we come to the living room, which apart from the snowbound color on the walls and the new drapery rod, not much happened to, unless we look at the fireplace. This puppy went from raw brick to white paint to black paint. I added shiplap above the fireplace to give height to the room by connecting to the ceiling, and then again, with my dad, built a custom white oak mantle to attach to the tiny concrete slab that had been there. The living room now felt anchored in the massive open space of the ranch and gave a sense of purpose to positioning your furniture. Now I'm going to answer a few questions that came in over the course of the season and were submitted right at the very end. If you dislike the kitchen sink so much, why didn't you replace it? Oh, money. Yes, I disliked the kitchen sink because it didn't have the proper angle for the water to drain or food to drain or anything to drain. But it was just one of those things where you suck it up and deal with it because it was not a priority to replace. And who knew how it was jerry-rigged underneath with the plumbing and the garbage disposal? I know that underneath the sink, looking toward the back, the sheetrock was like, it wasn't cut open for pipes, it was like ripped open. So I didn't want to mess around with anything under there. Would you ever purchase a home with laminate or vinyl flooring again? Would I purchase one? Probably yes, but I wouldn't keep it, specifically if it was a laminate flooring that was meant to look like wood, because unless it's a really expensive version, they don't often look great. Cheaper laminate wood flooring tends to chip really easily, and once it chips, then you're filling it in with like a wood putty paste compound, and it never looks good again. Also, most of those types of floors are floating floors, so they're not actually attached to what's underneath, so they can be kind of bouncy and get bubbles almost underneath them. So that's just blech. My current kitchen floor is luxury vinyl tile, and I have no issue with that. So again, it depends. Did you have to pull permits for the renovations you did to the ranch? Did I pull them? No. Should I have? Probably. Someone made a joke once about needing a permit to change a light bulb in Brooklyn Park. So I, in short, was probably required to do it, but I just didn't. So there's that. Is there anything structural you would have done to make this house more your taste? If money were of no issue, absolutely. I would have knocked that dumb shed down on the side of the house, for starters. If money were really no issue, I would have taken out the big main deck and expanded the house outward that way. So it wouldn't have been a California ranch anymore and the sliding glass doors would have gone. I would have used that space to make like a study or more of like a TV room so that you didn't have to have a TV right in the front. I would have torn the wall of closets in the primary bedroom out and moved them to the wall that had a little bit of an angled ceiling above it, which is where they should have been the whole time because the room was actually a perfect square, so it didn't matter where you put that wall. I would have added windows to a couple walls, so one in the hallway where that was facing the guest bathroom, one in the room that ended up being the guest bedroom, so those would have been both facing west, and then I actually would have added another window facing south in the room that ended up being the office. And I would have probably put those up really high so that people couldn't see into them and it wouldn't have interfered with the board and batten that I had already installed. And then as I mentioned in the backyard episode, I really would have just landscaped the hell out of that area. In retrospect, what color would you have painted each of the main rooms instead of what you chose? That's a tough one to answer because I just never felt really inspired in that house. At the time, I did have an appreciation for the Japandi design aesthetic, which is Japanese and Scandinavian design sort of merged together. And that was what influenced the living room and the kitchen. So I probably would have leaned harder into that and then designed the rest of the spaces around it. How much did you put into the ranch? Because there were appliances that were added, like the fridge, the oven, the washing machine, which I didn't mention in the basement episode. I did replace the washing machine because the old one broke, and then also the water heater. Those all added up to about $5,500. There was the initial basement carpeting, which cost $800, and then there was the $600 deductible that had to be met when the basement was cleaned up of poop and everything was replaced. And then I think for all of the Sherwin-Williams paint, it was about $1,500, let's say. So at this point, let's just say we're at $8,500. The primary bathroom remodel, that was the big expense for the house, and that was about $7,000. For me, the big savings in everything was me doing the labor myself rather than having to hire that out. And the only things I had to hire out were some plumbing and electrical things. All in all, with the landscaping costs, the stain that I had to use for the deck, knickknacks, this, that, I'll say that I probably spent less than $18,000 on the ranch. What was the story about your doorbell and Halloween? Oh God. I love Halloween and I go all out for it. And in 2022, I did the same thing. I was all prepped with the house lit up outside, the pumpkins were carved, spider webs, yada yada, all that stuff. And I did not get a single trick-or-treater. I thought I heard someone knocking at the door at one point, but when I got to the door, there was nobody there. Halfway through the evening, I got up and looked outside and I didn't see any kids, but I pushed the doorbell, and that was when I realized that the doorbell was broken. So I couldn't hear the kids ringing the doorbell, and it's a miracle that my pumpkins didn't get smashed for them wasting their time walking all the way up to my front door. You spent a lot of time on your fireplace and how much you loved the mantle. Does your current house have one? The estate does not have a fireplace. I think it would be a great episode for this channel to show how to build a fireplace mantle and all that stuff, but we'll see. I do miss having a good mantle to decorate though, that's for sure. Did you find anything in the walls or interesting stuff people left behind? Nope, not a single thing. The house was boring as shit. The most interesting thing for me to find was the 1990s linoleum that was hidden underneath the original kitchen counter, and that was it. While I had purchased the ranch on September 30th, 2020 for $236,000, I listed it for sale on January 31st, 2023 for $334,900, which was almost a $100,000 increase. The showings began on Thursday, February 2nd. They were fast and furious and stressful, scheduled back to back, and I had to be away from the house essentially those full 4 days because with them being scheduled back to back and open house in there as well, I wasn't allowed to be at home. By the end of that first day, I had my very first full price offer, which was actually above full price. The next morning, Friday morning, more offers were in, and then I was able to do something that I had not been able to do with the manor, which was request best and final offers by the end of the day Sunday. I was pulling the same card that was pulled on me when I bought the house, and while I would have loved to have been a shit and ignored anyone that put an escalation clause into their offer, I believe the one that I chose did have that clause, which was they would pay $1,000 above whatever the highest offer was within a certain amount. I accepted that offer and it ended up being for $351,000, which was a total profit from when I bought the ranch of $115,000. After the agent fees were paid and whatever else had to come out of that profit, I walked away with $92,500, which based on what I put into the house, that was a profit of approximately $75,000. I remember asking Chad if people had submitted letters, offer letters, and he had said, yes, there were some offer letters that came through, but I'm not gonna show them to you. And the reason behind that was that people can, when you submit an offer letter, if you put certain details about yourself in their skin color to sexuality, like whatever, anything, if they don't get the house, they can then say that it was discrimination toward them. And Chad wanted to protect me from that. It's a good thing that he didn't let me read them, because there was a letter from a couple with a transgender spouse that was training to be in the Olympics. And I just thought, like, well, if I had read this, I would have given them the house. And the offer was, I want to say it was like $20,000 lower than what I ended up accepting. They had a very low down payment, like all the things. And it was basically the same offer that I had made on the manor in terms of first time home buyer. You didn't have two nickels to rub together, blah, blah, blah. But here's this whole story about us and how we're great. And so Chad let me read it after the fact, but yes, that was that. I've not made it a secret that I did not enjoy living in the ranch. My time there was marred by all sorts of different things from beginning to end. And though it started looking up in the end, it didn't start that way, and it didn't turn out that way until I'd say 4 months before I moved. So I wanted to take a dive into those things, and we're just gonna kind of bullet point them out. Starting off, moving in had not gone as intended, with the whoopsie doodle of my closing date being pushed 2 weeks due to a clerical error, and then me having to stay in that apartment for 2 weeks. There was the tonsillitis during that apartment stay, having to have my right tonsil lanced open at the hospital. That December of 2020, a few days before Christmas, I had to drive myself from work to the ER on a Saturday morning to check myself in for intense pain in my stomach that ended up being a 7mm kidney stone. I'm getting a stent put in a little while. I'm pretty drugged up, but I've been upgraded from the ER to a lovely room with a view. So that's good. So the stint went well, and that's done, and I finally feel a little bit of comfort without all the drugs. And they did decide to keep me overnight, so I'm here. And I finally got to eat something after 24 hours, so that's great. But the best part is that I get to reenact Jurassic Park with my lime green jello. They had to surgically implant a stent from my kidney to my bladder to make sure that the stone stopped trying to escape, since it couldn't get out and it was just causing the pain. Because I worked for Williams-Sonoma Inc., which owns Pottery Barn, we had a very strict COVID policy in place from the beginning. At that point in time, with the winter surge of infections, and I don't remember if there was a vaccine or not at that point, they put a travel ban in place. So if you traveled out of the state where your store was located, when you came back, you had to quarantine for something like a week or 10 days. Obviously, being the store manager, I couldn't be away from the business that long. So I already knew that I would be staying home for Christmas. And this was really hard for me, not just being away from family, but just being alone on that day that I very much look forward to every year, because it's one of my favorite days. And then of course also from feeling like shit due to the kidney stone. I spent Christmas Day in solitude. I remember waking up that morning and the reality of it just making me have a good cry. And then later in the day, my entire family got together on a Zoom call so that we could be together in some sort of fashion for Christmas. The next day, I turned 35, which I also knew would be hard because I'd be doing it alone. And people called and I had chats. And at the end of the day, Jonathan showed up with a cake and did what he could in his own special way to make it a good birthday.
No, I needed to light. Happy birthday! Oh, I just aged another 35 years.
A bit after that, my friend Renee came over and I think we all watched a movie, and it ended up being a pretty nice wrap to the day. Because I couldn't get that dumb candle to turn off, I had to take it outside to the trash can right away because you couldn't silence it, and then this was the next day.
It's been 24 hours.
The first surgery was in early January, which had me quarantining for something like 11 days. Jonathan was my steward for that and through it, driving me and waiting for me and driving me home after and staying the night because I wasn't allowed to be alone from the anesthesia. This surgery was a shockwave surgery, which meant that they were trying to break up the stone into essentially powder so that I could pass it really easily. A few weeks later, when I went to get my stent removed, they had to do another x-ray beforehand just to make sure. They found that not only had the stone not dissipated, it was actually bigger now. So it was another round of quarantine. This time my friend Jill would be the one taking me in for surgery and staying with me that night. After my recovery from that, the stent did officially come out, but it was 2 months from start to finish. After those 2 months of essentially being able to do nothing, I joined a gym and paid for 6 months of a personal trainer. I was dropping weight and feeling good, getting into better shape than I'd arguably ever been, and that was awesome. The breakup that I went through while living in the manor, the one that was, we'll just say it was hard. In the summer of 2021, we decided to get back together. Round 2 of dating was great for a couple of months, then it was less great, and then ultimately it ended in March of 2022. Heartbreak takes different forms at different times, and this one came about from the realization that no matter how much you may have wanted something, it just wasn't meant to be. Depression ensued, weight gain ensued. That's no one's fault but my own, so I don't, assign blame to an individual for that. I am responsible for what I eat, it's my own thing. My job at Pottery Barn had had me feeling miserable for years at that point. Being a corporate-minded person who always followed the rules, despite the way that it affected my personal life and relationships, it was getting worse and worse. I had the opportunity to apply for a position that would have had me traveling from store to store, not actually bound to a single store. And I was really excited about it because it was a role that I had wanted for almost the whole time that I had worked there. I confirmed that the role was available with my boss. I felt great about it. And then a week later, I was gaslit about that conversation. And at that point, I'd had it. After 10 years of giving my soul, and really, it sounds dramatic, but really giving my youth to that company, I had had it. So I quit. And honestly, it was one of the happiest days of my life. As an aside, I found out a couple months later that that role I had wanted at Pottery Barn, it was real, and I really was gaslit about it. I was affirmed even more in my choice to leave. I took the role of general manager at Banana Republic. However, I had underlying health issues that were starting to rear up. The stress of a new job in a place that was, I'll just say not doing well and was understaffed. That stress caused a panic attack for me where in the middle of a Saturday afternoon and ringing people up during some big promotion that we only had like 3 people working for, it was insane. I had to go to the bathroom. I was curled on the floor and thinking that I was having a heart attack and that I was going to die. It wasn't a good feeling. It shook me utterly to my core in a way I had never been before. I had never felt that scared in my life. So in addition to what was a stress disorder, I was diagnosed with Meniere's disease. I'd been dealing all summer with an issue in my left ear where it would feel muffled, and then I would have these bouts of feeling kind of motion sick. And then one day I had vertigo so bad that I couldn't stop throwing up. So I went in, got diagnosed with Meniere's, which is an autoimmune disorder where your body does not properly convert sodium into potassium. So the result is that your Eustachian tube, I want to say, swells with fluid in your ear until it bursts. The fluid that bursts from it ends up causing vertigo. It drains, you're fine, and then the whole process starts up again. What this meant was restricting my intake of sodium to 1,200 milligrams a day. To put that into context, a single tortilla, a single round disc tortilla that you would use to make a burrito, has 950 milligrams in it. So my diet changed completely, which meant my weight plummeted. Ultimately, and as an aside, I do believe that the Meniere's disease diagnosis was a misdiagnosis, as it can also be replicated by people with TMJ and my bite guard for grinding my teeth at night. I hadn't had it for several months because it broke, and it can also be replicated by stress. So I have not had an issue since I quit retail, but now you know. As my weight plummeted and my depression kicked me in the balls, a month into all of this, the lights finally got turned on for me. I was offered a job, my current job that I actively have, working remotely for a software development firm as a technical writer. So, feeling like an asshole, I gave Banana Republic a full 1 month notice and quit. My last day would be a couple days before Halloween of 2022. It really was the best decision for me, with the stress, with the panic attack, with everything that was going on, and Meniere's was very real at that moment also. I couldn't do it anymore. And with the vertigo that you never knew when it was going to come on, with all these issues, I could not be the person they needed me to be at that store. I could not be the leader they needed. And I wanted out. I had an escape route and I wanted to take it. I was done. I just got in the car from finishing up my last shift with Banana Republic, also known as my last shift in retail in general. 19 years comes to a close. And this is the first time in 17 years that this carabiner and plasticky cord will no longer have keys to a store. I took this thing from my parents' junk drawer in 2005 when I was the stockroom manager at Express, and I have used it ever since. And it can officially be retired now. But now things were looking up. This was my first holiday season in 19 years that I would not be working retail, and I could do anything I wanted. I could work from anywhere I wanted. That meant ultimately I could finally sell the ranch and move back to Wisconsin, where my family was, where I felt I needed to be. Jonathan moved in at the end of November just to stay with me for a few months before the house was going to be sold. It was wonderful having him there. He works for an airline, so he wasn't around all the time. But when he was, we just had a great time together. Amidst my plans to sell and execute the final fixes and polishes that the ranch needed, Jonathan and I planned our trip to Sydney, Australia, which was and is one of the biggest highlights of my life. Because I was going to be purchasing a new house, I reached out to my old friend Brenda, who got me set up in the very first place at the manor with a realtor. Brenda's a realtor here in the Fox Valley. I said, hey, moving back, I want to do this. So she set up an MLS portal for me so that I could view the houses that were available. I wanted a historic house. I wanted to get back to something with history. So at the end of January 2023, a house popped up in my portal that I thought, that's the house. Like, that checks every single box that I have. I have to see this. So I drove to Wisconsin on a Friday night. I viewed the house first thing in the morning, fell in love at first sight, wrote an offer from the Starbucks where I wrote 2 of my books, and I thought, this is meant to be, this is it. Submitted the offer, and I didn't get the house. I decided I wouldn't look for a house again until I was actually living back in Wisconsin, because that drive, it was 5 hours to get here, 5 hours to get back. I did it all in a single, 24, 36-hour period. I couldn't keep doing that. Because I would be living with my parents again, if I was here in the area when a house popped up, it was just going to be a 15 or 20 minute drive to go and see it. Time went on, the ranch went on the market, and it sold immediately. My ride or die best friend Katie came back to Minnesota for one final visit. A few days later, Jonathan and I flew to Australia. That house that I had wanted and made an offer on came back on the market while we were in Australia. And by the time we returned to the US and landed in Los Angeles at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, I had a text message waiting for me from Brenda telling me I got the house. As with the ranch, being in California was the good luck token I needed to get what I wanted. Maybe it's because I was born and raised there. I don't know. My family moved to Appleton, Wisconsin, March 15th, 1997. At the start of this video today, I told you that this is the season finale because it's the 26th episode and because the number 26 means something to me. Turning 26 was my golden birthday. I filmed a year of my life with 26 golden things. And wouldn't you just believe it, I would be moving back to Wisconsin on March 15th, 2023. 26 years later to the day. Things have a really weird way of coming around full circle You just have to look for the signs. To mirror the image taken day one in the ranch, I took this one. Same clothes, same pose, same spot. That first day photo was smoke and mirrors with all of my furniture pushed to the side to indicate the house was empty around me. And just like that first photo, this alleged last one was taken the day before Jonathan and I flew to Australia with all of the furniture pushed to the side once more. The ranch was never as it seemed. My life there was never as it seemed. I deleted my Facebook account that first fall living there for a multitude of reasons, but then I also deleted Instagram and took 8 months away from it. A lot of this was to break the habit of doom scrolling. In reality, it was to hide. I don't like lying, and posting nothing but happiness on social media is a lie. Nothing on social media is real. It can't be. And if I can't be authentic, or at least as authentic as I should be, then I don't want to do it. And then it was over, and the truck was loaded, and the cats were loaded, and I was leaving it all behind. I mentioned a few videos back that moving away was complicated, and it really was. On the surface, I was ecstatic to be getting away from that house and onward to, by all intents and purposes, something that felt like a fresh start. Deeper than that, it felt like I had failed again at life. Just like when I moved away from Texas, I was admitting that I hadn't been able to make it while living away from my family and my original core group of friends. I know now how that isn't an accurate depiction of things. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, and that doesn't mean that you failed. It just means it wasn't what you wanted it to be. And that's okay. It has to be okay. Instead of wallowing in what wasn't meant to be, you need to turn and look for the next thing that will be what you want it to be. I sound like a self-help guru, and I'm not trying to, but this is the reality of my life. This is what I choose to look at, what I choose to see. And by moving here and by getting this house, I feel like I found what I wanted. Is it forever? Probably not. But for right now, it's pretty great. If the manor had been a house of growing, learning from the past and then moving on from it, the ranch was a house of what it's like living with trauma. And trauma takes all sorts of forms. It can be confronting demons from past relationships. It can be facing health issues and the varying levels of seriousness that they present. It can be the emotional abuse and manipulation you endured for far too long at a bad job. It can be depression, you name it. Trauma can be it. But there are some things that the ranch gave me that I will never get again. And one of them was the closeness I obtained by living with Jonathan for those 3 short months. We lived together so briefly, but it was this time for healing for both of us, and it was something that we both so desperately needed. The reality check, the shoulders to cry on, the laughter that comes from just being able to be yourself around another individual without the expectation of romance. I mentioned in the first video this season that I always wanted my moment in the ranch to just be alone inside with nothing else in it. And that happened on March 15th. And you know what? It felt just as empty in my heart in that moment as it had the day I moved in. The furniture didn't change any of that. It was me. It was what was in me. I hated that house. I hated that house from day one. I hated it the day I left. That's how it is. Of the entire Restoring Sean process, looking back and going through this house was the thing that I dreaded the absolute most, because it meant traveling back to a place where I was truly unhappy and at times desperately trying to find the light at the end of the tunnel. So in closing, in the end, what did I ultimately learn from living at the ranch? I learned that despite all of the hardships and the trauma, despite the illnesses and the pain, life always went on. It wasn't always great, and it wasn't always great specifically when I was by myself. But there were people that made it better. They were the ones that kept me moving and thinking and laughing and smiling. There was the wedding of some of my closest friends and the graduation of one of my oldest friends. There were visits to Arizona to see my best friend, and visits she made in turn to visit me and another of my bests. There were understandings that finally formed after a few years of not being sure. Families that developed from people I had once simply hired as my employees and had grown to love. Old friends came around. New friends planted their stakes that would never let go. The joy of being included with the guys. The thrill of being included in a new group. It's the people that show up for you when they have nothing to gain from it, and the people that take care of you and go for the laugh when they know you need it. Visits home where old bonds were repaired and only grew stronger, where former coworkers had become another sister, and where time spent with my parents just made me feel all the more content and happy with how things had turned out. Because they don't always go the way that we want, not really, but they do tend to go the way that we need. Even if we don't want to see it that way, even if we can't see it that way. The universe has a funny way of bringing things to your doorstep, and you can be ready or you cannot be ready, but it still does, because that's life. It's never convenient, it's not always easy, but it keeps moving on. And eventually, if you're lucky, you get to move back to where your heart was, and you get to start over again with whatever family you get to call your own. I know I did. And that is officially a wrap on season 2 of Restoring Sean. And just like the title says, I feel restored. Thank you so much for watching today and over the last couple months as I took you through all of the hits and misses that the ranch offered. If you have questions or comments on anything you saw today, please feel free to drop them below and I will be sure to answer them as soon as I can. While you're at it, please click the like button because it really helps me out, and click the subscribe button if you haven't already because it'll help you out. And maybe, because it's season finale, if you feel like going that extra step, share this video with someone, some people, whatever. By subscribing, you'll be reminded every Wednesday morning when a new episode drops, like next week. Oh, wait a second here. You thought I was taking a break. You thought that because the next episode isn't until January 1st that I'd be MIA until then. No, my darling. We're just getting started. You see, the first 2 seasons of Restoring Sean have been in the houses I used to live in. Now we can flip the format of this channel and start having the real fun, because trust me, it's all been building to what's coming next. Join me next week Wednesday when we kick off the spooky season and the very first ever special presentation of Restoring Sean, Decorate for Halloween with me, followed by 3 more Halloween projects. 2 of them are projects that you can do along right with me, and the third being the video I have teased for months now, Ghosts of the Manor. I will be taking a hiatus through November, but there are 3 holiday-themed videos to tide you over in December until season 3, Restoring the Estate, comes to life on January 1st. Until then, take care. Thank you for your kindness that you have shown toward me as I've gone through the highs and lows of my first 2 houses, and I will see you soon. Now I get to get rid of my beard.